Well, welcome back, everybody, and it's good to talk to you once again. Dan McTeague, President of Canadians for Affordable Energy. We have not done this in a couple of weeks. There have been a lot of issues that have really struck the country, especially on the energy front. But I'll leave the political side for now and talk about something that affects each and every one of us. Regardless of where we are in Canada, we all pay a carbon tax. Now, that is considered bad news. The federal government tries to make it good news by saying, oh, you get a bit of a rebate. In fact, 80% of you will receive more than what you pay. The logic on that simply doesn't match the reality, nor does the explanation of the government when it's confronted with what the Parliamentary Budget Officer has said about such a claim. They have said very clearly that increasingly middle-class Canadians, whether it be in Alberta, Saskatchewan, Ontario, Manitoba, and now, of course, many Atlantic provinces will pay far more than what they put in, especially as the number increases every year. Now, we all pay the carbon tax, and some of us get a check every once in a while, and the check may sound like a lot, but it doesn't add up to the cost impact, not just on fuel or heating fuel, but more importantly, on how that hits other manufacturers and industry and farmers who are forced to pass those higher prices on. You know, it's an old expression, but it's an important one. In Canada, like anywhere else, there is no such thing as a free lunch. The intention of carbon taxes is to raise prices to a point where you either don't use them, or if you do, you have to reach deeper into your pockets. So if you can't afford heating, then you just don't use it. In a country like Canada, you freeze. If you don't have enough money to make ends meet to use some form of transportation, many of us driving older vehicles, then you just don't go to work and you don't make enough money to make ends meet. I think the most damning part of this, and this is something that we have talked about many times at the Canadians for Affordable Energy, is the effect the carbon tax is having on food prices. And while there are many environmentalists and economists who want to dance around the truth, the reality is that when a farmer has to pay an input tax, a mushroom farmer, for instance, in the Ottawa Valley, I think this was signaled not too long ago by the leader of the Conservative Party, whoever it may be, I really don't care. The reality is when they're paying $15,000, $16,000 a month in carbon taxes, $9,000 during the summer period, they have to pass that on. And it isn't lost on them or anyone else who's been in the business who knows that the cost of transporting, of seeding, all of these things have a carbon tax embedded in them. And when you think about the actual number of carbon tax here in Ontario, 11.05 cents a litre, pretty much across the country, except Quebec, which has its own cap and trades about 9 cents a litre. They're allowed to get their sacrosanct. No one is going to go after them in much the way the federal government went after Nova Scotia. But I digress. That number, 11.05 cents a litre plus HST in this province, divided to the federal and provincial governments, is higher than the rate of inflation itself. When you think about it, 11.05 cents a litre plus 13% works out to about 15 cents a litre on $1.40 a litre. That's 9 cents. When will the Bank of Canada and politicians in this country start to wake up to the reality that their trendy little carbon tax, which bribes people with their own money, doesn't give them back everything that they thought they were going to get in terms of food prices and many other things, including the HST or GST that's applied to it? When will they wake up and recognize that this is a self-defeating problem, that going after inflation when in fact you have government policies creating it deliberately to raise the price, to cripple people's ability to make ends meet? Is it any wonder that affordability in this country has been eroded? Now, we've been talking about this for a long time. You know that I joined Canadians for Affordable Energy back in 2019, and I have warned that this was going to happen. Well, my warning obviously has fallen on deaf ears, save and except those of you here who have to go to a grocery store today and wonder why the price is so high. So the farmer has to pay a carbon tax. He has to deliver that product from the farm gate to the transport company, which has to add into its diesel costs a carbon tax. It then has to be processed at some point using natural gas, propane, or whatever other form of energy, which likely also has a carbon tax. It's then again transported to the grocery store, which also then has to be subjected to a carbon tax. So this tax cascading, this compounding of the carbon tax, is very lethal for a country as cold as ours, in which there is a greater demand for foods that have to be shipped in from far away places. So while I focused on food, the carbon tax permeates and in fact it impacts every part of our aspect of our lifetime. If it were not for the carbon tax itself, the overall totality of green policy of blocking pipelines, of creating emission caps, of preventing oil from getting to global markets means that the Canadian dollar also suffers. Now, friends, you and I pay for everything. The glasses, the phone is all priced in US dollars. And so when you price everything based on the US dollar, we no longer have the protection of the petrodollar, as we did back in 2008 and again in 2011. It means that we take about a 30% hit on our purchase power. It costs you 30% more because the Canadian dollar is no longer attractive. No one wants to invest in Canada because you have a government in Ottawa, supported by some politicians in other provinces, and at the municipal level say, no, we don't need natural gas or oil. Good luck trying to get make the day end today on a cold day like we're seeing here in Toronto, this being the Friday. The reality is that we're now looking at a circumstance where green grifters and green policies haven't just created the monster called the carbon tax, the inflationary monster called the carbon tax. They've actually compounded that with other policies that are having the effect of destroying the Canadian dollar. And as a result, we are fighting this never-ending battle of seeing inflation rise because of these carbon green policies. And at the same time, a Bank of Canada that's saying, oh, that's inflation. Yes, we can talk about printed money. We can talk about what happened, the excesses in the construction industry with housing and the bubble that took place, funded in no small part by lower than expected interest rates that the Bank of Canada said would be around for a lot longer. And many people believe that that's the way they should go. The underlying locomotive pushing energy prices higher and inflation higher is, in fact, green policies. It's only a matter of time before people in my community in the GTA in Toronto make the connection between voting for parties like the Liberal, NDP, and Greens, and to a lesser extent Bloc, who are promoting and pushing these green policies, and their inability to make ends meet. With 50% of Canadians now unable to make ends meet and having to borrow friends' credit cards or visit food banks, the Canadian dream is quickly slipping away so that green grifters can continue to line their pockets. I realize these are very, very hard comments to make, but it's time for Canadians to wake up and to take the members of Parliament on the Liberal side and on the Green side and on the NDP side and let them know that their policies have failed, and they are failing Canadians who are most desperate and who need policies that reflect the need to make ends meet. For those that don't, well, I can only suggest, having had some experience in that department, you will be lined up in the 30-yard line and punted through the end zone. That's it for this week. Let's do this once again, but do come back and read our blogs at Canadians for Affordable Energy. We're as excited about these policies because it's time for a pushback on bad public policy, damaging, hurting, and eroding the Canadian dream.